Energy Minister Josh Frydenberg joins us now. Minister, you've called for an investigation today. Why not wait for the results before you blame renewable energy?
Well, this is not the first time that South Australia has had a blackout. As you know, last September, 1.7 million people lost their power and the whole state went into the black. That's the first time any state across Australia has ever done that. Then they had another blackout in December, another blackout in January, and now they've got one in February. So it's a pattern of instability. They also pay the highest electricity prices in the national electricity market, and that's the problem for South Australia. So we're all for renewables, but the transition has to be done in a smooth, in a considered way, and unfortunately South Australia, by getting more than 40% of their power from wind and solar, have invited this level of instability.
But didn't this time they have capacity? Like, the outcome didn't need to be like this time.
Well, obviously the Pelican Point plant did not come on, and it could have come on at any time. The operators of that plant could have bid into the system and supplied the power across the state. But the reality is South Australia has become inherently unstable because they're relying on intermittent sources of generation. The coal-fired power station in South Australia closed down last May, so they really now only rely on coal-fired power imported from Victoria, on gas, as well as a high uptake of wind and solar.
Minister, I'm not sure this makes much sense. They shut down a coal-fired power plant. If that was on, it wouldn't have been enough to stop this situation. You've just admitted the problem was that the Pelican Point source of power was not switched on. If it had been switched on, there wouldn't be a problem. They are going to switch it on tomorrow, or for tomorrow, so there aren't any. So all of that has nothing to do with renewables.
Actually, Wally, that's not right. If there was a 500 megawatt power plant, which was Northern and a coal-fired power station in the system, there wouldn't have had to be this 100 megawatts of load shedding, which led to the problems yesterday.
The coal plant that was shut down recently wasn't of that capacity. But anyway, leave that to one side. The point is the Pelican Point, lack of switch on, the non-switch on of Pelican Point was the issue here. That's not a renewable problem.
Well, actually, the bigger problem was the drop in supply from wind power, because wind can provide up to 80% of South Australia's energy needs, but last night when they had the blackout, it only fell to 2.5% of South Australia's
let's break this down. Let's break this down. There is wind power. When that drops, you have this whole backup system where what you're meant to do is switch the thing on so it provides the power that isn't there. That system was all there, it all works fine, and they made a decision not to switch it on. It sounds like the real problem is with that decision and why that was made.
Well, actually, that power could have been into the market at any time if the company had decided to do so. And it's the state government, the Labor state government, not the federal government, that can declare an emergency situation and direct a company like ENGIE, which owns Pelican Point, to put power into the system. So, look, my message is very clear. We want stability, we want affordability. We know that there's a transition in the energy system to more renewables, but it just has to be done in a really considered way. And unfortunately, the big experiment, Waleed, that they've had in South Australia, that's the terms that is being used by the Premier of South Australia, has really failed up to this point.
Well, OK, Josh, let's talk about New South Wales then. And if your theory about renewables is correct, they don't rely on renewables as much. So can you guarantee that there won't be any blackouts in New South Wales with their heatwave this weekend?
Well, I've spoken to the Australian Energy Market Operator, and they're confident that the New South Wales system will cope. The benefit that New South Wales does have is that it's got a lot of this black coal-fired power, and that can be provided 24/7. So it doesn't mean that if there's a fall in the supply of wind, there's an increased problem in the system. So they should be in a much better position to cope. But as you know, New South Wales hasn't seen anything like the price hikes and the instability that we've seen in South Australia.
Minister, just to finish on a slightly lighter note, you must be happy with Malcolm Turnbull recently. I mean, he ripped Bill Shorten a new one yesterday. Does it get you excited to see the captain up and about?
It was like a free ticket to a boxing ring, just sitting there in the Parliament. I mean, it got a pretty pointed discussion, but in reality, we know what our job is ahead of us. We had some important legislation around childcare. Obviously, we've cut back on politicians' entitlements. I think the public was expecting that to be done. We're doing some other things in industrial relations. So the Parliament is working.
Josh, it was meant to be a light way to finish, but we got back to heavy real quick.
If only your energy could run out.
We appreciate your time, as always. Thanks, John.
Thanks, guys. See ya.